I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hey, folks, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Paul. Again, this is Conduit News, and we're going to get to it here in just a second. We do have a good show for you. Coming up at the top of the next hour, we'll be talking with State Representative Dwight Tosh via phone. He'll be giving his impression of the session. Also, we will be talking with former State Senator Brian King. At 7:33, he's going to be giving his thoughts on former Senator Linda Collins and her death and her passing and really everything that she meant for the state of Arkansas and how fearless she really was, how she was in many ways incorruptible when you look at how she was willing to stand up to whatever political environment was in existence at the time. And it was amazing to watch. We're going to talk to him about that. He has actually given on Facebook, Brian King, some really interesting posts out there about his thoughts with her. So I've been talking with him over the last several days in the wake of this tragedy that we're still trying to put together the pieces. The gag order certainly doesn't help. That's very frustrating, and I'll get to that here in just a moment. But first, there's an event tomorrow in the Capitol Rotunda down in Little Rock, and I'm going to be in attendance. This is a remembrance event for Linda Collins. This will be tomorrow. That's June the 11th at 10 a.m. Ken Yang, I believe, who was the last person to work with Linda. Ken Yang, he created this, and it says, please wear red for Linda. So they're asking people that do turn out tomorrow at the Capitol. It's a press conference / remembrance event for Linda. That's, again, at 10 a.m., 10 to 11 tomorrow at the Arkansas State Capitol. And so that's going to be something that is very important for Linda and her friends, especially those who worked with her in government or around government. We also have the official obituary from Fears Family Funeral Home. We do have arrangements that have been announced for former Senator Linda Collins and where everything will take place. I'm told the visitation, all services for Linda Collins, where it will be held at the Sutton Free Will Baptist Church in Pocahontas. Visitation will be from 4 to 8 on Friday, June 14th. Linda's funeral service will begin at 10 a.m. on Saturday, June 15th. And then there will be a private burial that will be held immediately following Linda's funeral service with the family, a private family burial. There have been several people writing things, remembering who she was. I said in the immediate wake of this tragedy, the good thing is for Linda, if you knew her, that she was marked by the love of Christ, and that all who knew her were loved by her. I mean, she treated everybody amazingly. She was interested. She wanted to know who you were, how your family was. And what's fascinating to me is reading so many people's posts about this and how similar they all are. But for Linda, it wasn't the end. Death was not the end. In the Christian life, to die is to gain. And this is from Jerry Cox, though. Jerry Cox, the president and CEO of the Family Council. I got this in an email, I guess, on Friday. And he penned something that was quite moving and quite touching. Remembering our dear friend, Senator Linda Collins, Our dear friend, former Senator Linda Collins of Pocahontas, was found dead in her home on Tuesday evening. At this time, details are scarce, so we don't want to go into what may have happened. I want everyone to know that Linda was first and foremost a Christian who lived out her faith. She was fearless when it came to standing up for Christian values. I'm reminded of the passage in Ephesians 6:13, therefore take up the full armor of God so that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything to stand firm. Linda always stood firm. In a tough vote at the Capitol, we could always count on her to stand. When the winds of politics blew hard against her, she stood firm. When she lost her race for re-election to the Senate, she stood firm. When my wife, Doris, and I went to the Capitol on a Sunday afternoon in January to help Linda move out of her office, she was at peace, looking more rested than I had seen her in years. She said goodbye to the Capitol. Now, we're the ones saying goodbye to Linda. But I'm sure she would tell us not to be sad. I'm sure she's doing great, more at peace, more rested than ever before. But it's still heartbreaking to lose a friend. Linda had more energy than half a dozen lawmakers, Jerry Cox writes. When the rest of us were worn out and sleeping, Linda was still at work. She understood the urgency of passing laws to save babies from abortion, so she passed them. She had a smile big enough to light up the room. When people were down, she lifted their spirits. She understood that life was not about her, so she helped everyone, even her political adversaries. Linda stood for what was right. Always. When others talked about giving in, she understood that if you have nothing to stand for, there is nothing to live for. So Linda lived for a purpose much higher than any elected office. She lived for God, and that made all the difference. Jerry Cox writes, when I heard the news of her passing, I felt helpless. There was nothing I could do for her except be grateful that I knew her. So this small effort in writing is all I can do for her now. This is for Linda and all that she meant to me and all of us at Family Council. That's Jerry Cox, again, president of the Family Council. Very, very moving. And again, there is a common thread in all of these posts and letters that you're reading about her. And so, and I think that's why everybody wants. I think that's why everyone wants to get together tomorrow at the Capitol, again at 10 a.m. for a press conference / event to remember Linda. We also have a interesting situation. So the state GOP, the Arkansas Republican Party, they had a state meeting this past weekend, and there was a follow-up article on that. Hunter Field from the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, ex-senator on the minds at state GOP meeting. And obviously everybody, is grieving in their own way. They decided, though, which is just, take it for what it is, party chairman Doyle Webb said the party has created a special fund in Linda's name to recruit female candidates to run for office. Arkansas Attorney General Leslie Rutledge made the first contribution to the fund. She appears via video Saturday to address state Republicans. So there's now a fund for in Linda's name to recruit more women. Now, look, I think everybody's trying to do something in their own way because they feel bad about this status. She was murdered. And there's also another Facebook page, by the way, Justice for Linda Collins. You should look that up on Facebook because there's people that are asking questions, and we need to pray for our law enforcement. We need to pray for the investigators to take the case wherever the facts would lead them. There's people that want justice. I know one thing. Listen, in the wake of the loss of my friend, Senator Linda Collins, the last thing I'm thinking about is that there's a problem with the amount of women in politics. That's what I'll say. That's literally the last thing on my mind, that there's some sort of imbalance with there's some sort of something wrong with the amount of women or the lack thereof serving in public office today. Literally the last thing that's on my mind right now is that. And that was my first reaction when I read that. Listen, I know people want to do stuff. I'm just saying, I just think Chris Wessel, just to give you some news, those of you across the state listening, Chris Wessel is the editor of the Jonesboro Sun. He penned an article that was in the newspaper on Sunday. Gag order in murder case is judicial overreach. There's a lot of people saying this. Picking up in the middle of the article, he says, never in my 36-year career in the newspaper business have I known a judge to issue a gag order on law enforcement before an arrest is even made in a murder case, much less before the victim was officially identified. On Wednesday, 3rd Judicial District Prosecuting Attorney Henry Boyce, he writes, sought and received the gag order from 3rd Judicial District Circuit Judge Harold Irwin, sealing all details of the murder investigation and prohibiting law enforcement officials from providing any information to the media about Colin Smith's case, even though her body hadn't been officially identified by the state crime lab and no one had been arrested. Why? What information about this murder merits shutting everyone up and denying the media access to basic public information about the case? If it were you or me who was murdered in this fashion, there would be no gag order. You can bet on that. It smacks of special treatment or a cover-up, he writes. Judicial overreach at a minimum. I doubt that it's even legal. It's why many brave souls in the state legislature and former Governor Winthrop Rockefeller, who led the charge, developed the state's Freedom of Information Act. He goes on. Says Colin Smith's case would have Rockefeller rolling over in his grave. Still mum's the word. On Thursday, Arkansas State Police officials announced that everyone already knew, what everyone already knew, that the body found at her home in Pocahontas was, in fact, former Senator Linda Collins. In the statement released Thursday morning, the state police also noted that the death is being investigated as a homicide. Cause of death, how long she had been dead, toxicology reports, and other details about the murder were not released, apparently per the gag order. Bill Sadler of the Arkansas State Police said police officials will not comment on the case until a break occurs, such as an arrest or some other significant event. Apparently, the gag order only applies to certain information authorities want hidden. Ironically, the state police weren't included by name in Judge Irwin's gag order. I find it odd that a prosecutor who's running for a judge seat would get a judge to issue a gag order about the basic facts of a murder case, the slaying of a former state senator, no less. At the very least, it seems unethical considering no one has been arrested in the murder. Whose rights are being... there's an interesting something at play here. A lot of people are wondering, the reason this doesn't make sense is because how can a court get involved when nothing's been brought to the court yet? There's not been anything, this branch of government hasn't even been activated yet because there is no arrest, there's no charge, there's only investigation going on. And so, because some people were like, well, why, can we challenge this gag order, in an effort to pursue justice? Can we challenge this gag order, get a court involved? How do you get a court involved when there was nothing before the court in the first place? Listen, I'm not an attorney. I'm just saying this is what some people are raising about this. Let's see here. Find it odd that a prosecutor who's running for judge, the slaying of a former senator, at the very least, it seems unethical considering no one has been arrested in the murder. Whose rights are being protected here? Chris Wessel, again, the Jonesboro Sun, writes, also Collins recently went through a messy divorce with her ex-husband, retired 3rd Judicial District Judge Philip Smith, who was banned in March from ever serving as a judge again. Smith used a computer in the Randolph County Courthouse to alter information in the couple's divorce case. In agreeing to the allegations as part of a negotiated settlement, the effect is the same as removal from office. In light of the gag order, journalists across Arkansas and beyond, including here at the Jonesboro Sun, will be rolling up their sleeves and digging in deeper to find out what happened to Collins. That's what happens when government officials try to keep secrets from the public. We'll continue to do our best to keep you informed about the crime occurring in our communities so you won't be caught with your guard down. Just ask Colin Smith's neighbors in Pocahontas. They're terrified. A murderer is still on the loose in their neighborhood. It's only human nature to fear the unknown, and the judge who issued the gag order in this case has only elevated their anxiety, not to mention conspiracy theories across the entire planet at this point as well. The telephone number is 870-275-9799. I would love to hear what you guys think. You can call or text. Sound off over at facebook.com/Conduit News. Also, the YouTube channel. Just search for Conduit News. Click the little bell after you subscribe. Click the little bell to receive notifications, please. Okay, folks, we're going to take a break. We're going to reset here. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back here in just a moment. This is Conduit News. We've been doing these things called impressions of the session. We already had one earlier today, around an hour ago. We were talking with State Representative Spencer Hawks. That video will be available over at conduitnews.com. But we have a very, let's just say, special impression of the session. We have on the phone line the host of the Dave Ellswick Show, Mr. Dave Ellswick. Dave, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, and Mr. was my father. You just call me Dave, you know that.
All right, yeah. So Dave, I just wanted to, I'm going to give you the floor, and then we can get into specifics later. Dave Ellswick, what was your impression of the session 2019?
Chances available, chances missed, chances made. I was happy in a few areas, disappointed in several areas, was not happy with the way they dealt with financial matters, happy with what they did as far as freedom of speech.
Hey, folks, it's me, Paul Harrell. I want to say hello to everybody out there who's listening. We appreciate you and your support, especially those listening on KFPW, the Marshall out of Fort Smith, 96.7 FM, 1230 AM. You know, for all of our listeners, if you ever missed the program, you can get us online at conduitnews.com, facebook.com/Conduit News, or our YouTube channel. Just search for Conduit News and be sure to click the subscribe button and click the little bell to receive notifications. Here at Conduit News Radio, we provide you multiple ways to listen to your number one source for Arkansas news and politics. ConduitNews.com.
Who's next to Zipline?
Me, and I'm really excited about this.
Sir, I'm sorry. The Zipline has a 350-pound weight limit, and frankly, I do not think it would be safe for you.
Oh, that's okay. I self-identify as 180 pounds, so it's cool.
Sir, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm afraid we can't let you ride the Zipline. You're too heavy. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. I thought we had evolved as a society. I thought this was America, but I guess this is just my plight. First slavery, and now fat shaming.
Sir, again, I'm really sorry.
You listen to me. If you don't let me ride, not only will I sue this company for discrimination, I will sue you for damages because right now my feelings are so hurt and I feel embarrassed because I'm holding up the line.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Watch it, mister.
Look, okay, I'm sorry. I just don't think it would be safe for you.
You don't understand. I self-identify as skinny. So you have to let me ride the zip line. The Constitution says so. I get to define my own reality.
Oh, you know what? Okay, fine. Whatever. Ride the zip line. Mike, let this man ride the zip line.
Thank you. Now watch as my self-identity trumps your bigotry. See you on the other side, racist. Here I go! Doctor, thank goodness. What's the prognosis?
Sir, we've done everything we can, and you only have seconds to live.
No, you cannot say that. I do not self-identify as a dead person.
PHP Parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with us today. Joe's in the other room going over meme of the day candidates, if you will. Which ones are we going to be? Which one will we choose today? We will give you your meme of the day coming up around 7:50ish, somewhere in there when we come back from break for the last segment of the show. Becoming an increasingly popular segment because it's just fun to have some comedy, man. To have some comedy. To laugh a little bit. Especially the political sense. I will remind you, the reason these are so funny is because the left gets so triggered by them, number one. Number two, the left having a very, very difficult time figuring out how to meme properly, with the captions and everything else, because they're fundamentally they have really shot themselves. Can you say that? Well, no, I'm saying that because they're so anti-free speech, and they are anti-free speech. What is going on with YouTube? What is going on with Facebook? But let's just talk about YouTube for a second. YouTube used to be a place where independent content creators could do whatever they wanted, and it was free. I mean, it was all okay. It's like in the context of freedom of speech, either all of it's okay unless it's criminal, or none of it's okay. And now they have their own rules, and it's all because they're leftists. It's all because they can't compete. It's because, well, if you find something, just take comedy for example. Everyone finds something really funny, and the leftists can't stand to be laughed at. They can't stand to have their ideas mocked. You look at what they're doing to Steven Crowder's channel, for example, just demonetizing the entire thing when he hasn't done anything but be successful and be popular. And that's the thing. These ideas are more and more popular. For example, the reason Donald Trump is in the White House, they believe, is because the internet was too free. And there were too many people that were giving what they think is fake news, and that they were somehow duped into voting. They weren't duped into voting for him. They weren't lied to. That's not why they voted for him. And so this really does, in the context of the memes, they are anti-free speech, therefore they're anti-comedy. They can't laugh, and they can't stand the sound of laughter. By the way, go read the Screw Tape letters, because Wormwood wasn't a fan of laughter either. By the way, because it just makes things makes things harder to control. And I can't believe I'm saying this, because when I was growing up, your best comedians, they all voted Democrat. When I say best, you know what I mean, the ones that were popular, whatever, and funny. A lot of them are crass and crude and that sort of thing, but you get the point. You have those guys, those old guys, they can't even really do their own comedy anymore. Me and my wife, we've been watching old Seinfeld episodes. You have any idea how many episodes of the show Seinfeld could not be made today? Because it's just not. They're hilarious. They're still so funny, but not politically correct. Can't do that. Can't laugh in that way, even though everyone knows that it is true, or there's a stereotype in there that's reinforced every day, which is why it's funny in the first place. You get my point. This society is burning books. We now are burning books. It's terrifying, actually. It's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. These private companies who are now so popular, and if you actually look into some of the Edward Snowden disclosures, the government itself, and let's just say the deep state itself, through a program called PRISM, has backdoor encryption keys into all of these things, because they've given Google a ton of money. Your taxpayer dollars have been given to Facebook. Your taxpayer dollars have been given to YouTube. And through this program, PRISM, they have backdoor into all of this stuff. So they get all of your information, okay, according to these disclosures. And then these private companies are now, whether you say spying or whether, let's say, violate your First Amendment, they're doing things that the government itself can't do. They're doing things that the government itself wouldn't be able to do, but private companies are allowed to do it. We are in a conundrum here in this country.
Vice, disappointed about what they did with guns. I just don't know some of the things that they did and why they didn't do it. Of course, it was only one person that derailed the whole thing about, the castle doctor stand your ground. That happened with Cooper, and we'll hopefully get rid of him come next spring. But we're finding out as we go along who the true conservatives are and who the pseudo-conservatives are.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about that. And it's definitely, we're definitely getting a lot more information, and that's good. Just in terms of, we have people voting for higher taxes. So when you said, financial things, is that what you're talking about? Are you kind of sad where everything ended up on the taxes?
Well, taxes, not cutting back on government, but expanding government. I mean, those are conservative Republican clauses that the legislature didn't deal with and didn't deal with them well. And the people that I talked to, there's a lot of people that weren't happy the way things went. Hopefully, in the next session that comes up, let's see, 19, 20, 21, I would hope that what we'll see is people who are able more to think for themselves and less for, I will do exactly as I've been told to march to do.
Yeah. You mentioned life, social issues. I mean, I thought one of the best moments of the session was the trigger bill, the anti-abortion trigger law.
Mm-hmm.
That was Senator Rapert and State Representative Bentley.
Well, I'll be honest. I mean, there's a lot of things that State Senator Rapert and I don't see eye to eye on. That is not one of them. I mean, he and I see eye to eye about life issues right on. I mean, he is one of the best pro-life politicians that I know. Mary Bentley's the same way, pro-life as well. She and I see eye to eye more with that. We see more eye to eye than probably on issues of taxation than what I do with Senator Rapert.
Do you think it would have been better? I mean, let's back to the tax increases. I think it would have been better if they would have said, okay, listen, we've got to have X amount of dollars more from the people. I mean, I still would have hated this, but X amount of dollars more from the people. We got to have it, but we've found $50-60 million in cuts or savings that we're going to use for roads or whatever. So we found that.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Did anyone see, real quick here, the friendship bracelet with Barack Obama? This was weird. Did you see this? I don't have this one pulled up, but if you'll Google this real quick, just Google Joe Biden makes friendship bracelet for Barack Obama. Internet mockery ensues. It's a Daily Wire article. So it was apparently National Best Friends Day a couple of days ago. And former Vice President Joe Biden is banking on his connection with former President Barack Obama. And so they throw up this. Okay, so Saturday was Best Friends Day. Biden posted a photo of two friendship bracelets, one saying Joe and one saying Barack. Yeah, that's the article. Can we scroll down and get a photo here for the viewing? Look at this. That's okay. Look at this. What is going on? And you have Joe's bracelet has a smiley face bead and a piece of pizza. What is that? Is that pie? A piece of pie. And then Barack's bracelet has some sort of flower and star bead on it. And of course, everyone decided to make fun of him. The caption read, "Happy Best Friends Day." At the time, back when Obama was considered suitably progressive and the Democrat Party was united in its efforts to defeat then-Republican candidate Donald Trump, the tweet drew rave reviews. Accounts with blue check marks nodded approvingly, responding with heart eye emojis and pleas for Obama and Biden to stay in office forever. Saturday's tweet, though, did not earn Biden the same unbridled admiration. Instead, it inspired a wave of mockery from all sides and scorn, even from Barack Obama's former campaign guru, David Axelrod. David Axelrod, a.k.a. the Mr. Belvedere of the Obama administration. Social media responded by asking Biden if he was okay and called the former Veep clingy and really weird. Others pointed out that although Joe Biden is staying close friends with Barack, Obama has been less than friendly when it comes to supporting his former vice president. When Biden finally announced his intent to run for president in April, Obama didn't jump at the chance to see his heir apparent off of the campaign trail. In fact, although Obama publicly wished Biden well, he made no endorsement. A lot of people think Obama is withholding his endorsement for somebody like Michelle Obama to get in the race. That this is all, they're kind of waiting. They're going to let the first debate go by, kind of weed out some of the other contenders, and then when everyone is depressed, when they realize that their best chance is Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden, who, because of the way they look, because the Democrat Party is obsessed with their warped idea of diversity, which means that it's just about how you look, not how you think. Then all of a sudden, a woman and a black woman will get into the race, and everyone will lose. A former first race, yeah, I know there's already a black woman in the race, Kamala Extract, but still, former first lady, that sort of thing. A lot of people think that's what's going on, but we'll see. We will wait and see. Okay, reminder, coming up at the top of the next hour, we'll be talking with State Representative Dwight Tosh, who will be giving us his impression of the session. We've had quite a few impression of the sessions over the last 4 or 5 weeks, and we're amassing quite the library, so we'll be talking to him. Then former Senator Brian King will be on at 7:33, and we'll be talking about the late Linda Collins. A few things happened over the weekend that you need to know about if you haven't heard already, and that is that President Trump struck a deal with Mexico. I'm sure you've heard about it by now. What you may not have heard is how the liberal media is reacting to it. They're in shock and utter disbelief, so they're making arguments that make absolutely no sense because they refuse to give President Trump credit for out-negotiating or standing up for the United States, trying to stop this massive wave of illegal immigration. You see, for the mainstream media to give Trump credit for this deal he struck with Mexico, they would also have to acknowledge that there is, in fact, a crisis and a massive problem at the border. Those two things they don't want to do. They don't want to give Trump credit, and they also don't want to acknowledge that there is, in fact, a crisis at the southern border. But this opinion piece did make it into the Washington Post by Hugh Hewitt because President Trump emerges as a clear winner from his week-long confrontation with Mexico over our neighbor's lax enforcement of its southern border, reflexive Trump critics will scramble to find some new way of containing what is a clear Trump triumph, which came with assists by Mike Pence and Mike Pompeo. Already, we have heard about long-term damage to trust between North American allies, our investor nervousness, and Trump's unpredictability. This sort of flailing about to deny the obvious says nothing about Trump and much more about those critics who can no more admit he played high-stakes poker and won a round on border security than they can admit that the president delivered a magnificent tribute to the heroes of Normandy on Thursday. This is true as well. This is true. So, first of all, what's the first thing you need to know? Well, number one is if you love avocados, at least for now, it appears that avocados are going to remain at a low price. And so that's good. If you love guacamole, well, that's what, avocados make guacamole, so you're good there as well. So I'm excited about that. But I will say that the New York Times, not so thrilled. So President Trump has slammed the New York Times because they decided to say, this deal that he struck with Mexico, they had already agreed to. And this is all basically a bunch of lies, deception, and it's not true. Trump saying that once again, the New York Times has proven that they are the enemy of the people. I want to remind you, the first person I ever heard to say that phrase was the late Pat Caddell, former Democrat pollster for Jimmy Carter. President Trump renewed his attack on the New York Times, a frequent target, Sunday, after the paper reported that Mexico had agreed to take action at the border. This from thehill.com. Trump tweeted Sunday that it was another false report. We've been trying to get some of these border actions for a long time. We'll get to those tweets here in just a minute. But what did the New York Times actually report Saturday? They reported that the deal that Trump announced to avoid tariffs on goods from Mexico was similar to actions Mexico had agreed to in prior discussions, meaning they had already agreed to this before Trump ever made his threats of a 5% tariff on all goods coming in from Mexico. So what in the world were they so upset about? What in the world were they so upset about then? Listen to the tweets here by President Trump. We have this on the screen if you want to throw this up there. Here's the tweet from President Trump. Another false report on the failing New York Times. We have been trying to get some of these border actions for a long time. So what did the media do? They said, so Trump is slamming the New York Times and confirming the New York Times. No, they're claiming that Trump engaged in some sort of a broad political theater where he threatened the tariffs already knowing he had the deal. I mean, you can, if you want to believe that, you can. You absolutely can. The bottom line is there wasn't a deal announced until he said, hey, listen, if you don't start doing something about the tariffs, about the illegal immigration problem, you don't start securing your border, your southern border with Guatemala, then this is what's going to happen. So you've been negotiating. It was the threat of the tariffs that obviously got them over the hump and said, okay, we're actually going to do something. We're going to sign an agreement. But he says we were not able to get them or get them in full until our signed agreement with Mexico. Additionally, and for many years, Mexico was not being cooperative on the border in things we had or didn't have, and now I have full confidence, especially after speaking to their president yesterday, that they will be very cooperative and want to get the job properly done. Importantly, some things not mentioned in yesterday's press release, one in particular, were agreed upon. That will be announced at an appropriate time. There is now going to be a great cooperation between Mexico and the USA, something that didn't exist for decades. However, if for some unknown reason there is not, we can always go back to our previous very profitable position of tariffs, but I don't believe that will be necessary. The failing New York Times and ratings challenge CNN will do anything possible to see our country fail. They are truly the enemy of the American people. So, who do you believe? I mean, who do you believe? The media never stops. They never take a moment of self-reflection. They have to find a way. I mean, think about this. We're talking about a deal many people thought the president would never get. Remember, he told Mexico that you're gonna pay for the wall. He said things like the wall just got 10 feet higher. And now you have this guy negotiating with Mexico. It's inarguable from a position of strength because they know this guy. It doesn't care what Republican House members say. It doesn't care what Republican senators say. It obviously doesn't care what the Democrats say. He will do what he thinks he needs to do to get the deal that he wants. Now, whether you like it or not, objectively, I think we can all look at the situation and say that when President Trump says or threatens to do something, it's a serious threat because he's willing to walk away. Matter of fact, what was the senator? Was it Senator Johnson from Wisconsin who said on Meet the Press or one of those Sunday shows yesterday that he called the Mexican ambassador when Trump threatened and said, hey, listen, we don't have the votes in the Senate to block these tariffs, just so you know. So if he puts the tariffs on, we don't have the votes in Congress to actually undo the tariffs. So if the president says that he's going to put 5% tariff, he means he's going to put 5% tariffs. You've got some of the Never Trump crowd, or some of the people that are, more skeptical of Trump. They've come out now and they've said, "Hey, we were wrong. The president had a big win here." Go to Chuck Schumer though. Well, so what does Chuck Schumer and the Democrats do? This is what Schumer tweets. In February, Donald Trump declared a bogus emergency to build a wall he said will solve immigration. Then he made a bogus tariff threat even GOP and Congress rejected. Now he claims a bogus deal Mexico volunteered to do months ago. Common thread, all bogus, we know it. So they believe that the President of the United States is essentially conducting some sort of theatrical policy debate where there's a predetermined result and we're just playing it all out in real time. That's what they are. Now, if this was the Democrats and people on the right were saying such a thing, it would be universally mocked in the mainstream media. But I'm sure the mainstream media will promote this opinion as much as they can now that the New York Times. I mean, they are in a very interesting situation because they all said that the tariffs were last week. This was as early as last week. They all said, the media said, the Democrats said, terrible idea, going to be a tax increase on the American people. We had somebody, we introduced you to the gentleman from FreedomWorks who was on the program last week, who was skeptical about the tariffs and the Mexican, how it was going to turn. But he did say, but you know what? I hope it works out. I hope the president can figure out a way to get what he wants here. And it turns out that he did. I mean, Mexico, this is what's so hilarious to me, is that Mexico is sending National Guard troops, according to this deal, 5,000 to 6,000 National Guard troops to their southern border. And the Democrats are technically, the Democrats are just mad about it. They're upset about it. I will remind you that Donald Trump sent a bunch of National Guard troops to our southern border, and it was mocked. It was derided. The mainstream media made fun of him. It's not a real crisis, sir. What are you doing? And now we have Mexico saying that they're going to do the same thing, and the Democrats are still not happy about it. I mean, I wonder if they're going to come out more forcibly saying, well, the Mexican government, they're just, they're being racist by sending their National Guard to the Guatemala and Mexico border. They're being so immoral, walls are immoral. Barriers are immoral. I mean, I wonder, are the Democrats going to say those things? That's what they feel. Fascinating. Fascinating what's going on. I want to remind you, if you're just joining us tomorrow at the Capitol, there will be a press conference concerning Linda Collins, also a remembrance event. And that's tomorrow, Tuesday, June 11th at 10 a.m. It's going to be, let's see here. I think it's the second floor rotunda. Can I get to the About section here? Let me get I had this right in front of me. Oh, here it is. Here's the details. So a press conference, second floor rotunda, and remembrance event for former State Senator Linda Collins will be held on Tuesday, June 11th. A temporary memorial site and guest book will be set up on the first floor rotunda, where the public can come pay tribute in respect to Linda's memory. All notes, gifts, flowers, cards will be delivered to the family. Press and public are invited. We're asking attendees to wear red. Please send all inquiries to americandreamstrategies@gmail.com. So, wanted to remind everybody about that. Also, we have the visitation for Linda Collins on Friday in Pocahontas at the Fierce Family Funeral Home, as well as the Free Will Baptist Church in Pocahontas. It will be, the funeral will be Saturday at 10 a.m. And that is the Sutton Free Will Baptist Church in Pocahontas. So, the entire state of Arkansas, it's important to remember here, is still in a state of shock and is still grieving. But I will also remind you that the family is feeling this more than anyone as much as we're feeling it and confused, and we have all these questions, and we want justice for Linda, and we want to know who did this, and we want to know why they did it, because there is a why, I have a feeling. I just, without getting into too much speculation, it's just hard. It's a random act of violence. It just doesn't happen very often in Pocahontas. And with these circumstances, there's a lot of questions that we have. So, but please be in prayer for her family, for her children, for her grandchildren. Please, through this time, because there's a lot of questions that are going on. Tough questions with answers, but tough questions, like why. The telephone number 870-275-9799. We're going to take a break, going to reset here. Don't go anywhere. We got Dwight Tosh coming up at 7:05. That's in 15 minutes. Back in a minute.
Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Wife, disappointed about what they did with guns. I just don't know some of the things that they did and why they didn't do it. Of course, it was only one person that derailed the whole thing about, the castle doctor, stand your ground. That happened with Cooper, and we'll hopefully get rid of him come next spring. But we're finding out as we go along who the true conservatives are and who the pseudo-conservatives are.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about that. And it's definitely, we're definitely getting a lot more information, and that's good. Just in terms of, we have people voting for higher taxes. So when you said, financial things, is that what you're talking about? Are you kind of sad where everything ended up on the taxes?
Well, taxes, not cutting back on government, but expanding government. I mean, those are conservative Republican clauses that the legislature...
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Welcome back to the show. The FBI has released some more documents, this time about the investigation of Hillary Clinton. Andrew McCabe and James Comey have some very interesting questions to answer in terms of sending an email exonerating Hillary Clinton before she ever interviewed. Testing language. I mean, how is this? I should be like, how does this phrasing sound when it comes to, how should I say that we're not going to charge Hillary Clinton, that we recommend not pursuing it at this time. This was, of course, a month before she ever sat down and interviewed. An interview that was not under oath or recorded. I wonder if it even took place. Late Friday night, we got a document. This is from redstate.com. While we've already gotten ample evidence that Hillary obviously should have been charged for gross negligence, these latest revelations are pretty mind-blowing after you read them. This part, here's a tweet from Joseph Snatchtel, or Satchtel? Anyway, this part is insane. Sidney Blumenthal attempted to leverage his relationship with Hillary to get her to hand over a classified intelligence file that contains a roadmap to a $30 billion fortune. The FBI described one Excel spreadsheet with classified markers that may have been removed yet again as a potential smoking gun document. Back to Red State, starting with Hillary's actions, her criminality isn't even in doubt anymore. Stripping highly classified materials of their markings and then pushing them out via unapproved means is illegal. Nowhere in the statute is there a requirement for intent, nor could any serious person argue she didn't intend to do what she actively chose to do. But Sidney Blumenthal, or Blumenthal as I call him, it's even more interesting. Again, Jordan Satchtel. FBI says a redacted name who has a controversial history with the U.S. intelligence community was working with Blumenthal and a team of former IC operatives to attempt to cash in on these plundered assets in Libya. Any ideas who this individual is? How is Sidney Blumenthal still walking around a free man after participating in a conspiracy like that? Here's another tweet. Hillary used Sid plus Cody to develop the Trump-Russia dossier. This included identical intel to first dossier, which was crafted by Christopher Steele, who, by the way, is connected to Sid plus Cody through Jonathan Weiner, former U.S. Libya envoy. Man, I think those... I think we need to go back and listen to Rand Paul questioning what was really going on in Libya to Hillary Clinton's face in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Was there anything going on in Libya when it came to, running guns via, Turkey into Syria? Was there anything going on there? Boy, it's just setting up Syria to be Syria was a powder keg. I cautiously use the word was. If this were a Republican, it'd be a massive scandal, but because we are dealing with Democrats, the media won't. It's not even that. It's because you're dealing with Hillary Clinton, and at this point, there's so many more people that stand to lose a whole lot. I mean, when you have a situation where one person going down brings down a whole lot of other people, you're going to do everything you can to cover it up and ignore it. And that's exactly what Andrew McCabe and James Comey did. If Hillary had been charged, she would have taken everybody else. Even if she wouldn't have wanted to, she would have. Just because, and of course she would have wanted to, right? Because that's what you do. That's what people like her do. We've got one more hour coming your way next. State Representative Dwight Tosh coming up, going to give his impression of the session. Always excited to talk to him. Also, former Senator Brian King on Linda Collins Smith coming up in half an hour. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment.
Northwest Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Didn't deal with them well. And the people that I talked to, there's a lot of people that weren't happy the way things went. Hopefully, in the next session that comes up, let's see, 19, 20, 21, I would hope that what we'll see is people who are able more to think for themselves and less for, I will do exactly as I've been told to march to do.
Yeah. You mentioned life, social issues. I mean, I thought one of the best moments of the session was the trigger bill, the anti-abortion trigger law.
Mm-hmm.
That was Senator Rapert and State Representative Bentley.
Well, I'll be honest. I mean, there's a lot of things that State Senator Rapert and I don't see eye to eye on. That is not one of them. I mean, he and I see eye to eye about life issues right on. I mean, he is one of the best pro-life politicians that I know. Mary Bentley's the same way, pro-life as well. She and I see eye to eye more with that. We see more eye to eye than probably on issues of taxation than what I do with Senator Rapert.
Do you think it would have been better? I mean, let's back to the tax increases. I think it would have been better if, you know, they would have said, okay, listen, we've got to have X amount of dollars more from the people. I mean, I still would have hated this, but, you know, X amount of dollars more from the people. We got to have it. But we've found $50-60 million in cuts or savings that we're going to use for roads or whatever. So we found that, and we only need, you know, $30 million from the taxpayer. I mean, that would have at least been a little bit easier to swallow, but we didn't even have that conversation, it seems.
Oh, no, we didn't. We had that conversation back in 2013 when Beebe was the governor, and the bill moved along, and then it just suddenly disappeared and got squashed. You know, when State Representative Mayberry brought it back up, I thought this is good, but it came up so late into the session that it didn't have a real chance to, I think, gain any kind of traction. That's the one that I've been watching all along and been hoping that they'll follow all along, but I don't think we're going to see it, Paul, and I think maybe you would agree with me on this. We won't see it until the present occupant that's in the governor's office has run his course as governor of the state.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. We're talking with Dave Ellswick. I can't call him Mr. We're talking with Dave Ellswick. He is the host of Dave Ellswick Show. You can hear him on 101.1 The Answer out of Little Rock every day, every weekday from 2 to 6, right, Dave? It's on your 4-hour program.
Yep, I'm a 4-hour program. We're on 2 to 6, and we do it every day. We have fun. You know, some days we don't even talk politics. For the most part, though, we talk politics, and we do a lot on local politics. And that kind of takes me out of what a lot of people like sometimes. They'd rather talk about what's happening on the national circuit instead of what's happening right here in our own borders. And what happens right here in your own state has more effect on you than what happens in Washington, D.C.
You mentioned the Stand Your Ground law that failed, and it did fail by one vote out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, where Republican Senator John Cooper, who's now being primaried by Dan Sullivan, voted against it, voted with Stephanie Flowers. Speaking of this, kind of encapsulate, what was your impression on that whole situation, all the way from Stephanie Flowers' meltdown, where she told Alan Clark to go to hell, to John Cooper's no vote, siding with the Democrats?
You know, when I look at that, I still stand stunned. I was stunned that didn't pass. I think Stand Your Ground is a law in 33 states, so it's not like it's a hugely complicated or a hugely, I don't know, one of those bills that people find hard to understand or anything. I look at it, and it seems to me we all have the God-given right to protect our property, our curtilage, and everything else. And when we're out in public, we have the right to, protect our own bodies and maybe even protect the bodies of fellow citizens. I didn't understand what the problem was. I didn't hear it directly from Cooper. I heard it from reliable people that I know he told them that he voted against.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hey, folks, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. This is hour number 2. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we'll be talking with former Senator Brian King. He'll be reflecting upon really the tragic loss, learning of it last week, the murder of Senator Linda Collins. So we'll be talking to him to get his perspective on all of this because the two of them did know each other very well. Also, let's see, we have this event tomorrow in the Rotundra, which is a remembrance event of Linda Collins at the Capitol, Little Rock at 10 o'clock. It is a press conference / remembrance event. Hang on one second. My computer decides to malfunction right when I need the information. And it'll be a temporary memorial site. There'll be a guest book. We'll be there, first floor Rotundra. The public can come pay tribute in respect to Linda's memory. All notes, gifts, flowers, cards will be delivered to the family. Then, of course, we have, just want everyone to know this, we also have funeral arrangements. The visitation will be this Friday at the Fears Funeral Home from 4 to 8 p.m. All services, scratch that. All services for Linda will be held at the Sutton Free Will Baptist Church in Pocahontas. My apologies. So all services will be the Sutton Free Will Baptist Church. So visitation will be from 4 to 8 on Friday. And then we'll have the funeral service, which will begin at 10 a.m. on Saturday for the family. Then there'll be a private burial for the family immediately following the funeral. So I wanted everybody to know that. Everybody's still just kind of asking questions and are in a total state of shock. Folks, I wanted to welcome back to the program. We've got State Representative Dwight Tosh on the line from District 52, if memory serves correct. Dwight, how are you this morning, sir?
I'm doing great, Paul. Good to be with you.
Yes, sir. It's always great to have you on. So me and your colleagues, we've been doing these segments called Impressions of the Session. And I'm just going to let you kind of take it away, and then we can get into specifics later. So, State Representative Dwight Tosh, what was your impression of the session 2019?
Well, Paul, first, I'd just like to give a shout out to the speaker. I thought he did a great job, Speaker Shepard, in leading the 92nd General Assembly, and he demonstrated a lot of confidence to the legislators here, especially in Northeast Arkansas, by placing several in this area in leadership positions. Some of them received vice chair positions and subcommittees, and others chair of some subcommittees. Then, of course, we have 11 standing committees, and Representative Ladyman was selected as the chair of one of those committees. And another colleague of mine here, Representative Smith, had the support of Speaker Shepard, and the peers in the Republican Party voted Representative Smith as our majority whip. So I was very pleased to see Northeast Arkansas, the Speaker, reach out to this part of the state to seek that type of leadership in the House, and I think it speaks well for this area. And, of course, he put me in the position of chair of state agencies, and I was honored that he entrusted me with that position. But overall, I thought the session went. I thought it went very well. I know I ran a lot of legislation and was extremely busy, especially on the front end, and then as the state agencies, of course, a lot of legislation comes before that committee, and I had to focus on that. And some legislation I wanted to run, I ended up handing off to other legislators to get them to help me with it because I was so consumed with preparing for the state agencies meeting. But I thought it went smooth. I know I had a few pieces of legislation that that I was extremely proud of. One of the pieces of legislation that I sponsored this time and worked on was to make it more difficult for a small town that wanted to establish a law enforcement agency. In the past, the way the current law was, all they had to do was have a city council meeting and pass a resolution which would allow them to establish a police department. And, of course, these individuals would not have to receive any type of law enforcement training for up to 12 months, which to me opened the window for for abuse if not careful, because what people have to remember, and what I know from my background, is that, you know, that gives you access to the ACIC, which is the Arkansas Crime Information Center, and NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, and there's a lot of sensitive information on that. So I was extremely proud to be able to sponsor that bill to hopefully help protect the integrity of law enforcement and also the protection of our citizens. Another bill that I was extremely pleased with that I was able to sponsor was extending the time, excuse me, that the Department of Corrections and Community of Corrections could assist someone being paroled from prison with their driver's license. I got to research it and realize under the old law that once the person was paroled, that any help from the Department of Corrections had to cease at that point because of the wording of the old law. So we were able to change that, and that was well received by everyone. I was able to extend that for 180 days because if people look at that, one of the things we want those parolees to do is be able to get a job and go to work and contribute to society. And, of course, the excuse we were hearing, well, you know, I don't have a driver's license, I can't get back and forth to work. So hopefully we've eliminated that, and also the excuse that they didn't have a way to go see the parole officer has been eliminated. So I think it was a good bill and gave flexibility, a little more flexibility to the Department of Corrections. And, of course, another bill, and I think you and I talked about this in 2017, I ran a bill to help deregulate a lot of the restrictions that were being placed on professional wrestling. And it was really being hit hard here in Arkansas because they were being held under the same guidelines as a combative sport. And they were under the Athletic Commission.
Whoa. Wait just a minute. Are you telling me that wrestling is not real? Is that what you're saying here, Dwight?
Well, you said it first, Paul, not me. So
interesting.
Yeah, and I got a few boos. You get a few.
I feel like I'm at the end of this. I feel like I'm at the end of the movie The Sixth Sense. I don't know what to do with that.
I actually had to say that from the House floor to make people understand why this bill was so important. But yes, and I had a promoter contact me in one of the wrestling arenas, venues here in my district, and he said they're just being regulated to death. And so, and of course, they were under the same guidelines as you just alluded to as a combative sport. And so we were able, in the Athletic Commission, they worked with me along with the Department of Health, and we were able to remove them out from under the Athletic Commission because they were had to give up 5% of their gate. They had to pay a permit fee. And actually, a TV station out of Springfield, Missouri, actually called me after the session and did a segment that pro wrestling would be coming back to Arkansas and that they were excited about it. So I think it's just it was a win-win, and I'm excited about it.
When I think it's funny, Dwight, we're talking with State Representative Dwight Tosh. What I think is funny, how did it get regulated in the first place? Because people thought it was real. That's how it got regulated in the first place.
Okay. Yeah, and you're exactly right.
They did too good a job. They were too convincing.
let me tell you, I got invited from the promoter over in Tuckerman. He's a great guy, Ricky Rowland, and he's an awesome guy. And he's the one that brought this to my attention, how they were suffering and tried to just provide entertainment for those local areas and survive. But they just couldn't do it under all the guidelines and restrictions that had been imposed on them. So. Yeah. I think we've opened it back up. People are excited about it, and the word I'm getting is, like we just said, that we're going to see more and more of it coming back to Arkansas. So I think that's great. And, of course, you know, Paul, in every session, every legislator, he normally has one piece of legislation that they are extremely proud of. Maybe they're proud of all of them, but, in my case, is one that I guess I'm the proudest of, and that's a bill, and you and I briefly talked about this, I think, at one point. I was contacted by a nonprofit group of a veterans organization, and they told me what they wanted to do. They wanted to find some type of facility here in Arkansas where we could assist and help our veterans, and so I got with the Community of Corrections and the Department of Corrections, and I remember that in 2015, I believe it was, or in 2016, we closed the Southeast Arkansas Community of Corrections building down that housed the female inmates located there in Pine Bluff, and we moved them to Crittenden County. And so we had that building that was vacant. I got to looking into that. I found out that just to keep that building up and running was costing the state of Arkansas approximately $200,000 a year just for maintenance for a building that was not being used but that was owned by the state. So a bill, I guess, that consumed a lot of my time, but definitely was worth it, was to be able to work with the Attorney General's office and the governor's office, his attorneys there, as we worked out the logistics and working with this nonprofit veterans group. And we were able to put an emergency clause on that bill, and it passed the House without one no vote. The same on the Senate end. I mean, it was a win-win-win for the state of Arkansas, especially for our veterans. And what this facility will do will, Paul, it will provide it will first provide a place for people. We have 1,200 inmates currently that are being housed in the Department of Corrections that are veterans. And, of course, anytime anyone is paroled or they get ready to be paroled, they have to enter a reentry program and go through that to be able to hopefully help them adjust back to society. The veterans now will go to this facility in Pine Bluff as they are paroled to help them to reenter society, but also any of our veterans returning from overseas, it's some of them that's been in the war zones over there, and others, as they come back, they'll be able to go to this facility and help them adjust as they also adapt to returning to civil life, being a civilian again and adjusting to reentering society. But also any veteran with a dependency that has developed a dependency on some type of drugs or whatever, they will be able to go there to seek help. And just as and so important to me and so many others is the fact that it will also be a place that will provide a shelter for our veterans and hopefully get some of them from out of these cardboard boxes and out from underneath these overpasses. And so, I read a news link, I guess it was just within the last couple of days, and I've not had the opportunity to speak with anyone in the state of Oklahoma, but I saw where that they have set up a similar facility in their state, and I don't know if they following suit of what we did here in Arkansas, or I've not spoken with them, but had an opportunity to see. But I was pleased to see that, so I hope maybe that what we did here in Arkansas will kind of lead the way for others to
absolutely,
and like I said, we owe that to our veterans, and you and I have heard you speak on this quite a bit. Anytime we can help them, but it was a win-win-win for the state. It was a bill that I was excited about. It did take a lot of effort to get through all the hoops and everything, but we made it, and they are now. And one good thing about it, and this was brought up in the presentation of the bill, and the question was asked: what happens? What happens if this nonprofit organization decides to leave that facility? So we had it fixed where, if for any reason they decide to move on, then that piece of property will revert back to the state. So, as I said, it was a win-win for everyone.
We're talking with State Representative Dwight Tosh. Dwight, I want to ask you a question about taxes. You voted against SB 336, which was a tax increase of $95 million. You voted against that to fund our roads, which I think is I think that's a good thing. Others not so much. I guess if you know the roads argument. I want to ask you about that. Why did you vote against that, and why did you also vote against the internet sales tax? Because I know that was, some people were trying to say we can't pass the internet sales tax on its own, but we put the corporate tax provision in there, corporate tax cut, to make it a little bit more palatable. So what was your rationale with those two pieces of legislation?
Okay, on the first one, on the during the 2017 session, there was a bill that was introduced to increase the fuel tax, and I voted against it. And I guess it was last fall, sometime. You and I was on your show, and I remember at the very end of the show, you posed the question: if there is a bill that is run in the 2019 session that will a bill to increase the fuel tax, would you vote for it? And I believe my response was absolutely not. And that was a promise that I had made to my constituents, that I would not vote for a fuel increase. I did not realize that the governor was going to have that as part of his highway funding bill. Overall, I like the highway funding bill as far as taking $35 million from the casino and tapping into those sources to help fund our infrastructure. But in that bill was an increase of 3 cents, I believe, on the gas and 6 cents on diesel. And, Paul, just the bottom line is this. I had given my word, and that's one thing that I've always tried to do, and it's the way I've tried to always be, that if I'm telling you I'm going to do something, that's what I'm going to do, if at all possible. And I realized that, I had made a promise to my constituents, and I planned on keeping that promise. Wow. And so
thank you.
I stood strong and said no to that vote. Now, to the second part of your question was on the internet sales tax. I realized that in 2017 we were up against a Supreme Court ruling that said that, basically we were waiting on it to pave the way to see if illegally we could do that. Once that cleared the way, then obviously there was a bill run in the 2019 session that would impose the internet sales tax. And I heard it from both sides. I know the brick and mortar people, it was extremely important to them that we passed this to help them to be able to compete. The law was already in place. It was just not being collected. And in all honesty, I looked at that and was hearing a lot from my constituents, the help they needed in these rural towns. And so I was somewhat prepared to really take a close look at that and maybe even vote for it. And then as I really looked into that particular bill, as I was, like I said, actually considering voting for that, I realized that there had been added to that bill was a tax increase on car washes, the amount of water that they could use. And I just thought, that should not have been in there, in my opinion. And to vote for that then would place a tax increase on the water usage of a car wash.
Yeah.
And so I voted no.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of, votes for more money for the people, voting no on those two things is certainly trying to stop this, this increase of money from the people to the government. And we've got to go, State Representative Dwight Tosh, but I do want to ask you, I'm looking at these DFNA numbers. Do you think when it's all said and done, I love the fact that you voted for a tax cut for income taxes. That was great. But it seems that, there are all these other agendas to get more money from the people. So when it's all said and done, do you think in the next couple of fiscal years, the people of Arkansas are going to be paying more money to the government, not less?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. And I think a lot of it, Paul, depends. I think it depends on each individual. How much do you drive an automobile? How much will you pay more in fuel tax versus the tax break that you got that we voted on, and I voted for that tax break. Depends on whether you drive a hybrid vehicle or not. There's an additional tax imposed on that. So I think a lot of it's going to come down to each individual citizen of the state, depending on the mileage that they drive every year versus, how much of a tax break did they get.
Aside from the individual, I'm just talking about overall tax burden on the people in terms of, is the government going to be getting more money because of changes in the tax policy?
I think probably overall I'd have to say probably, obviously your answer would like to be less, but I think there's a strong possibility it could be a little more.
Yeah. Well, we're out of time. State Representative Dwight Tosh, I appreciate your work with veterans. I appreciate everything that you did, sir, with criminal justice. And thank you so much for giving us your impression of the session. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. It's always great to be with you.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you. Folks, got to take a break. Back in a moment.
His prosecutor told him to vote against it. I heard that the sheriffs, I heard that the Arkansas State Police, I heard that the prosecuting attorneys all were telling many people that we didn't need this bill because we already had this bill within our present laws. I say you can't have too many bills that protect the Second Amendment and protect people and give people the rights to protect themselves.
I completely agree. I completely agree with you, Dave. Towards the end of the session, there were throughout the session there were some divisions among Republicans, but that's not true when it came to the end of the session with the anti-sanctuary city bill. Now, you live in central Arkansas, and there were all of these rumors floating around that Little Rock was edging toward being a sanctuary city. So I think this was a highlight of some of the good that was done, don't you?
Hey, folks, it's me, Paul Harrell. I want to say hello to everybody out there who's listening. We appreciate you and your support, especially those listening on KFPW, the Marshall out of Fort Smith, 96.7 FM, 1230 AM. For all of our listeners, if you ever missed the program, you can get us online at conduitnews.com, facebook.com/conduitnews, or our YouTube channel. Just search for Conduit News and be sure to click the subscribe button and click the little bell to receive notifications. Here at Conduit News Radio, we provide you multiple ways to listen to your #1 source for Arkansas news and politics. ConduitNews.com.
In Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent. Rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody.
Sorry, folks, we're up against a hard break. We're going to be right back with former Senator Brian King on Linda Collins. Don't go anywhere.
Man, are you tired of all of the drama?
Told him to vote against it. I heard that the sheriffs, I heard that the Arkansas State Police, I heard that the prosecuting attorneys all were telling many people that we didn't need this bill because we already had this bill within our present laws. I say you can't have too many bills that protect the Second Amendment and protect people and give people the rights to protect themselves.
I completely agree. I completely agree with you, Dave. Towards the end of the session, there were throughout the session there were some divisions among Republicans, but that's not true when it came to the end of the session with the anti-sanctuary city bill. Now, you live in central Arkansas, and there were all these rumors floating around that Little Rock was edging toward being a sanctuary city. So I think this was a highlight of some of the good that was done, don't you?
Well, look, I've been talking about what Little Rock has been doing under the four mayors of Sotola for the last 2.5 years, and the issuance of ID cards and all kinds of things going on. And, you can look at a dog and call it an orange, but if it looks, it smells, it barks, it acts like a dog, it's a dog. And the bottom line was that's exactly what they were doing in the city, edging towards sanctuary status, and they're not saying it because they don't want to. It's not a matter of tipping people off. If people look at it, they see it. The bottom line is they're just, they don't want to say it because it's such an incendiary word. But they are. They're moving towards being a sanctuary city. You got them. You got Eureka Springs. You got Fayetteville. All of those areas in this state are edging more and more towards sanctuary city status for illegal aliens. And we don't need that here in this state. Look, we know all the arguments. We know, the illegal immigrants, if we give them, ID, they think that the police are nice to them and the government's nice to them, and they're more apt to help us in investigations. If they're afraid that you're going to identify them and send them back home, they won't. Well, you know what? If they want to be American citizens, then they're going to identify wrongdoers. If they don't deserve to be American citizens.
We're talking to the sage of Arkansas Talk Radio, Dave Ellswick. He's host of the Dave Ellswick Show. You can hear him on Little Rock's 101.1 The Answer. Many of you do. We're broadcasting right now on 101.1 The Answer. Dave, you have been doing talk radio for a very long time. All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. Joining us now, we once again have former Senator Brian King is on the line. Brian, how are you this morning, sir?
Hey, I'm doing good, Paul. Wish we were talking under a little better circumstances.
Yeah, yeah, me too. So, Brian, just go ahead and tell us, what was your reaction, obviously, when you first heard the news of this tragedy of the murder of Linda Collins?
Well, and still just disbelief. I mean, it just almost seems like it's, I wouldn't say Twilight Zone, but it's just like, why? And why to Linda? I mean, that's part of my stuff of starting to say something about Linda, and because I feel like it's almost like, in some regards, it's almost like when we served together, how, the narrative would be driven from the media down there or some of these people about how fake things could be in Little Rock about what they would say publicly and what they would do privately behind the scenes. And, it's just, a lot of it is, centered around Linda and her stance on the Second Amendment and pro-life, and I just wanted to, say some things. There was so much more about Linda that needs to be said and focused on, which is not. But, once again, the narrative down there is a lot of this is the Second Amendment, drive that she had for protecting those rights. And, I remember serving on the Senate Judiciary Committee with Jeremy Hutchison, and he would just do unethical shenanigans constantly. I mean, it was just every time he stepped up there, it was just like, if something didn't happen, you were, like, surprised. And now a lot of the things that's come out on him that should have come out, years ago, I mean, the media just protected him. Let's just say it. And, Linda would be up there as the vice chair and countering. I mean, she was always being the one that was trying to stop him when he did something wrong and using his deceptive tactics and was constantly challenged, constantly trying to bring issues up. And he would, do everything he could as he could in the powerful chair position, to do that and diminish those things. And then you had the media sitting out there, and they would cover it, and then they would mischaracterize Linda. I mean, and then turn around and write glowing things about Jeremy and protect him. So Linda was, as much as she was driven on the Second Amendment, she was driven down the line in a lot of other things. I mean, look at the gas tax, that's got passed. It was supposed to sunset, now it doesn't sunset. So what gets said down there doesn't matter. And so Linda wouldn't play those games. Linda, looked out after the working person in her district and not the big money people in Little Rock. And, she weathered those things. She just was undaunted by those things. Didn't matter what the press, mischaracterized her and did. She got up the next day and just said, despite the consequences, I'm going to challenge the corruption down there consistently. I mean, you'll have somebody every once in a while that would step up and do something and act like they were Superman. No, Linda would constantly do it, despite the consequences. And to me, I think a lot of the focus that I think and remember about Linda was on those issues.
She was also such an encourager. We're talking with former Senator Brian King. She wouldn't give up. There were many times, Brian, I know you and her were on the same side of the issue, and you're a fighter as well. You still are. You certainly were in your time down there. But there were times where, we would lose. The conservatives would lose. Conservatives have lost quite a bit when it in recent years when it comes to big issues of, a bigger government. And you would keep fighting, but it can get daunting. It can get depressing at times. Linda never got depressed, did she?
Never did. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. She sure she got down and everything, and you did, and you got tired of, that was the one thing that is, is one of the things is, as a colleague down there, is counting on her. I mean, look at the DHS appropriation bill. If there was anything now. Outside of the policy debates, Medicaid expansion, not Medicaid expansion, where to spend Medicaid, how to prioritize it, the DHS appropriation bill was always financially, physically unsound. There was corruption going on. There was massive amounts of misspending that you had to try and find the answers to or try and get answers. You had a small window of opportunity to try and do that, and that's by holding up bills until your questions get answered. Once they got the appropriation bill, you lost most of all your power to find out anything. And so in the 17th session, it looked like we may have it held up to try and, get some questions answered, do some things. And you know what? Guess what? Terry Rice and Alan Clark go down there and vote for it and flip on us right there at the last minute, and didn't just flip. They went down there and spoke for it. And so, once they let that happen, then everything is out the door, okay? But Linda, you never had to worry about Linda. And she did it despite the consequences. And when you take those things, look at the lies that got said about her in the campaign, look at all the big money people that have pocketed greatly out of those things by people flip-flopping, and look at the things of, like I said, the money angles. Well, they use that to fund the campaign to tell the lies about Linda to be able to get their stool pitching in. That's just it. But Linda never did, and she just kept, you're right, she just kept going. And even a lot of times when I didn't have maybe the drive to do it or, time to do it, she was down there and kept going.
As I've also talked to people, she was also wanting to expose any corruption at all that existed, to the point where I think she also kind of gained a reputation that if you were a whistleblower, you could go to her. I mean, do you think that's correct?
I don't think there's any doubt about it when you were able to do that. And I think a lot of times when you're trying to expose corruption, you're trying to get questions answered that seem strange, it's that question of trying to get to the bottom of something. A lot of times you were just trying to get to the bottom of something, and you had to keep answering questions. You couldn't get the right or straight questions. People would tell you things, and sometimes people would tell you things that, quite frankly, there was another side of the story or things had to be explained. But what we do know is there is, and I don't think people don't get it out there, and the media down there in Little Rock, I keep saying, they will mischaracterize me or Linda. They'll do anything to protect what is going on down there. And people, it's like that. I don't think people, even a lot of the people, a lot of your listeners do, and a lot of the people, the true believers down there that have been down there, have seen enough stuff to know that what's going on. But you have this massive amount of people out there that do not even begin to know the amount of evil and deception and what is going on in Little Rock with the government, with the Hutchisons. They just don't have any clue or anything. And like I said, consistently, it's so frustrating to see somebody like Linda, especially with what happened to her, mischaracterized in the media, and then turn around and write glowing things about somebody like Jeremy Hutchison and protect him. It was very frustrating. But just like what you exactly said, despite the consequences of getting the lies told you about election, because, if you'll play the part down there and you'll give in to the crooks and you'll give in to that and you'll do some things for them, run some bills and take some hits and do these things to take care of the big interest down there, guess what? They're going to leave you alone. Linda didn't care. Linda kept going. I mean, she despite the consequences of everything that could happen as far as the media, what your colleagues do, what Jim Hendren would do, in judiciary, how many times do we have bills held up? And Jim Hendren, they didn't care. They just went down there and pulled the bill out of the committee.
Yeah.
The committee process didn't matter. And relentlessly, Linda never gave up. She wasn't one of them that just turned and flipped and ran and did this, and then would come out and do something every once in a while and act like they're Superman. She relentlessly kept going.
I'm really glad that you're bringing this up, just to set the record straight here. And specifically in light of the media, and it may be because the media in general mischaracterizes conservatives for so long that then when something like this happens, a tragedy, the murder of Linda Collins, they don't really know how else to they don't really know who she really was. For example, a couple of weeks ago, Brian, I know you and I talked about this article that was talking in the Gazette that was mentioning ethics reform, some of the ethics laws, quote, ethics laws that they got passed, but the ones that they did not get passed. And in all of that, they failed to mention that
they're not going to.
That you and Linda Collins had two different bills that would have exposed all the corruption the article mentioned, specifically with Jeremy Hutchinson. They failed to mention that it was in 2017, it was Senator Linda Collins who was at the well of the Senate debating Jeremy Hutchinson over a bill that would have prevented the preferred family health care scam that we all now know went on between them and Jeremy Hutchinson. And there's no mention of that at all in the paper then, and especially not now, and maybe that's because we just want justice for Linda. We want to know who did this awful thing, but there does seem to be a little bit of a blind spot.
No, there's not a little bit of a blind spot. They're going to be blind, and they're blind by choice. Jeremy Hutchison in that debate on that bill went down and just spoke and railed against Linda and the bill. I mean, just even railed against her intentions. He even, in a question back there, I remember specifically about that bill, I asked him, do you disclose your clients? And he went, yes. I thought it was an obvious lie. You'll never see anything in the media about that. And let me even go even farther, and people need to turn back the clock. And if you want to look at really a lot of the things about the path of Linda, that she went down there, was a Democrat, didn't like what was going on, stepped out and switched to being a Republican, took the heat on that decision, turned around, and then Mike Beebe gerrymanders the district to try and beat her out of the district. Literally, that mean and evil and deceptive. Nothing in the media about that, about doing that. There's nothing in there. You will never see everything about that. And then you go to, she loses, and then you go to the next phase where Linda relentlessly doesn't give up. She turns around and runs for Senate. She was never liked, or even it almost had to be forced when Michael Lamoureux to get them to support her against the Democrat. In fact, if you even turn back the clock, you want to go back to where a lot of this stuff comes. Michael Lamoureux was exposed to taking $120,000 out of his Faith and Freedom PAC for consulting. His answer in the paper, this is where he gets away with everything, was, well, I was recruiting candidates and informing people on issues. And I'm like, well, I was a Republican leader. I recruited candidates and informed people on issues. I didn't get a $120,000 consulting fee. So he says he sits there and recruiting candidates. We only had 2 Senate candidates, and guess what? He did nothing, absolutely nothing to recruit that. You never saw a follow-up in the news media down there about that. And he did not recruit Linda. I mean, it's just, and he gets a $120,000 check back to big lobbyists and big Medicaid. Okay, that's who gave the check to Michael Lamoureux, personal check. And so you go back to that, and then she wins. She goes down there, undaunted, keeps going with the same way, not falling in with the crowd down there, not sitting there, continuing to speak out, continue to challenge. That is the courage of Linda that needs to be talked about and looked at, because there's several of them down there that now, well, they just fell in. I mean, they just, if you cower down to them down there and you do that, you're not going to face the consequences of the elections, of the lies. I mean, like I said, you look at the same people that funded the lies in Linda's race to get their stool pigeon in there, is the same people that benefited from the bills of, like, the DHS appropriation bill that they so easily get every single time down there. This time it wasn't even a fight. Without me and Linda down there, they got it so easy. It wasn't even a news story.
Yeah, I guess I feel like if you're gonna, if you're gonna clarify who Linda was, just strictly politically speaking, she wasn't really. She wasn't the Democrat that switched Republican. She was somebody that was trying to get transparency, and she was standing up for corruption. And we're talking with former Senator Brian King. And I do want to mention, I believe Michael Wickline, when writing about Linda's death, did mention the attorney's bill, the anti-corruption bill, trying to keep attorneys from representing clients and being legislators at the same time. He did mention that. I was referencing another article by, I believe, Hammersley in the Gazette. But Brian, I want to get to the subject of this because I know you've been following the story. We don't know a lot about why Linda was murdered. We don't know a lot of details because of a gag order. And I know we're running out of time, but what were your thoughts on this gag order? A lot of people saying it doesn't make much sense, and it's really just fueling a lot of rampant speculation.
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I know there can be legitimate reasons, but in this case, once again, when you look at a lot of the things involved with who is involved, and you look at a lot of the things that Linda was trying to do, well, that's what fuels the speculation in this. I mean, it's just a total mistrust because Linda never kept going. She never quit trying to expose the truth. She wasn't one of these people that jumped in a little bit, jumped back out, flip-flopped on you on the DHS appropriation bill, didn't flip on the gas taxes and run gas taxes that the working man pays and the rich man, the rich man's dancing and the working man pays the band in this thing, as my dad said, in that whole gas tax thing. And the people that, like I said, flip-flop, she didn't take that route. And so naturally it spews speculation to the point of even more where we want to, as Linda would do, try and get to the bottom of the story,
Yes.
try and get to the facts. And what are you trying to do? Is this a legitimate reason to do this, or is this just another deal they're trying to cover things up like Jeremy Hutchison would do? That's the question.
Senator Brian King, we appreciate it, sir. Former Senator, we appreciate you coming on the program as always.
Hey, thanks, Paul.
I really I like what he said there towards the end. We've got to at this point we need to pray for the investigators. We need to pray that they go wherever the facts lead them in getting justice for Linda. And just like he was saying, Linda was a fighter and she didn't give up, and now we need to make sure that we get to the bottom of this, just like she got to the bottom and worked to get to the bottom so many times to expose what was really going on. A true conservative, a true limited government conservative, former Senator Linda Collins. Now we've got to step up and try to get to the bottom of this as well. Let me know what you guys think out there. You can sound off Facebook.com/Conduit News or the YouTube channel. Subscribe and click the little bell for notifications. Special thanks to former Senator Brian King for reminding us just what kind of public servant Linda was. Back in just a moment.
Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
And you've been in Arkansas for a while as well, and you have a very unique perspective. You have seen Arkansas be an anomaly in terms of being a Democrat state, dominated by Democrats, a blue state really in a sea of southern red compared to our neighbors. And then you saw what happened with Obama. You saw this transition. So from where we are today versus where we were, I would love to get your comments on seeing this transition and, where we need to go from here.
Well, I'll tell you. I think we are where we were when I was in Indiana at WIBC in Indianapolis. I went there to be a political reporter. I covered the State House, and then they moved me over into talk. And they went red in the mid 90s. They went solidly red in the mid 90s. But
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us. We're going to get to our meme of the day here in just a moment. But before we do, I want to remind you about the event. To remember, Senator Linda Collins, former Senator Linda Collins, going to take place tomorrow at 10 a.m. In Little Rock at the in the Rotunda. Let me read from this page that was set up by Mr. Ken Yang. A press conference on the second floor rotunda and remembrance event for former state senator Linda Collins will be held on Tuesday, June 11th, 2019. A temporary memorial site and guest book will be set up on the first floor rotunda where the public can come pay tribute and respect to Linda's memory. All notes, gifts, flowers, cards will be delivered to the family. And we also have funeral arrangements. All services will be held at the Sutton Free Will Baptist Church in Pocahontas. Visitation will be this coming Friday from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m., and Linda's funeral service will begin the following day on Saturday at 10 a.m., followed by a private family burial directly after the funeral. So they're saying that in lieu of flowers, the family respectfully suggests that donations be made to the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. The address there, 262 Danny Thomas, Memphis, Tennessee. Online condolences may be sent to the family by visiting FierceFamilyFuneralHome.com. So I wanted to let everybody know there. I'm planning on obviously being at the event. They're asking everybody at the event tomorrow at the Capitol, the makeshift or temporary memorial service to wear red in honor of former Senator Linda Collins. Here is your meme of the day. One that is, we need to laugh a little bit, folks. And here is the meme of the day. You see how creative these conservative memes are? This is fantastic. We'll post this up at conduitnews.com, at the Twitter handle at Conduit News, as well as facebook.com/Conduit News. Courtesy of Republicans Pride on Instagram, we have a photo of a soda fountain where a hand labeled Democrats is filling up a cup of soda from the soda fountain, but from two different drink dispensers, pushing two buttons at the same time. One of the sodas filling up the cup is entitled "Fought a War to Keep Slaves." The second soda is called "Claiming Republicans Are Racists." And then the cup and the hand is labeled Democrats. So that's what Democrats do. They basically have this mixture today where they literally fought a war to keep slaves and at the same time say that Republicans are racist. I wonder how that tastes. Probably tastes very, contradictory, right? The flavor of hypocrisy.
You know what's really funny about this picture, though?
Yeah. Taste the double standard.
If you look at them, this is the color based here. This is actually Pepsi and Coke. That's what's supposed to be.
Yeah, it is.
And so it's the same flavor, basically.
You're
getting the same flavor.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Although, I mean, I think
it's still Democrats. Democrats across the board. It's just same flavor.
But if we're going to get into the Coke Pepsi argument, obviously I would prefer a Coke.
For sure, 100%. Pepsi's garbage.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, right? I mean, the only thing good you can say about Pepsi is Mountain Dew. But yeah, I know. I'm just saying most people like this thing. And who wants a Mountain Dew? I mean, like what once a year or something. I'm like, I've got to have a Mountain Dew. You know what I mean? Now, yeah, Dr. Pepper, which used to be called, now that's a whole different ballgame. Dr. Pepper, which used to be called a Waco. They used to say, give me a Waco. And by the way, I've got family that lives in Waco, so I've been to the Dr. Pepper Museum 5 times or something. It's not nearly as big as like the Coke Museum. It's like the original one. It's real small or whatever, but yeah. Dr. Pepper certainly is delicious. Anyway, check out the meme of the day. Follow us on Twitter at Conduit News. And we will see you tomorrow with Bells on. Arkansas. Have a great Monday. Be safe.